good point to be made. Thank you for making that point. At this point, I think we will go on to the public comments. Our first individual is Paul Negulescu. He's the Senior Vice President from Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Paul, you're going to have about 5 minutes. And so we'll begin your time now. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. Yes, my name is Paul Negulescu and I'm a Senior Vice President of Research at Vertex. I've been leading our efforts to develop selective inhibitors of voltage-gated sodium channels, or NAVs, for the treatment of pain for the past 25 years. It's a special privilege for me to discuss the significance of suzetrigine as the first in a new class of pain medicines. Now, I understand earlier there was some controversy about the brand name, which is pronounced Journavx, which refers to the journey to develop selective NAV inhibitors. But I'll refer to the medicine by its generic name for the rest of my remarks. Until the recent FDA approval of suzetrigine, the options to treat acute pain were limited. In fact, the treatment of acute pain has generally consisted of NSAIDs and acetaminophen, which have limited efficacy in moderate to severe pain, and opioids, which are effective for more severe pain, but have tolerability concerns and carry the risk of addiction, which we've just heard a lot about. This treatment landscape and lack of innovation has led to an unmet need for safe and effective new medicines to treat the nearly 80 million people that experience acute pain each year in the US. Research in the 1990s showed that a specific type of voltage-gated sodium channel called NaV 1.8, and there are 9 in the human body, was selectively expressed in peripheral nerves and played a critical role in transmission of pain signals from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system. The research therefore suggested that inhibiting NaV 1.8 could provide analgesia. However, these NaV channels were hard to study, and we had to develop ways to measure their activity to support drug discovery. So, for example, we developed an instrument that uses electrical stimulation of NaV channels in living cells to identify compounds that inhibit 1.8 selectively. Throughout the 2000s, we used this technology and others to discover and optimize selective NaV 1.8 inhibitors, which led us to the discovery of suzetrigine. Suzetrigine represents a novel approach to pain management because it is an oral, non-opioid acute pain treatment and the first new class of pain medication approved by the FDA in over 2 decades. Suzetrigine is a pain signal inhibitor that acts by selectively inhibiting NaV 1.8 channels. Suzetrigine is greater than 31,000-fold selective for NaV 1.8 over all the other NaV subtypes, and therefore does not affect NaVs in other tissues of the body. Since NaV 1.8 is expressed only in the peripheral nervous system, and there is no NaV 1.8 expression in the brain, selective NaV 1.8 inhibitors do not have addictive potential due to this mechanism of action. This is supported by preclinical and clinical data. Suzetrigine efficacy and safety is supported by consistent results in a robust clinical trial program. In the randomized controlled phase 3 clinical trials of abdominoplasty and bunionectomy, suzetrigine showed superior efficacy in reducing pain compared to placebo. In all 3 trials, suzetrigine was generally safe and well tolerated and had a lower overall incidence of adverse events compared to placebo and the opioid comparator. Notably, those in the suzetrigine arm had a lower incidence of vomiting and nausea compared to those in the opioid arm. This is important because opioid-related adverse events are common and have been associated with worse patient outcomes and increased healthcare utilization. The humanistic and financial costs resulting from the opioid epidemic have significantly impacted individuals, families, and society. The risk of opioid misuse and opioid use disorder, or OUD, due to acute opioid prescriptions is established. Of the 40 million Americans prescribed an opioid for acute pain annually, we estimate that 85,000 of those will go on to develop OUD in the first year. The cost of the opioid epidemic is estimated to be over $160 billion a year, with many estimates much higher than that. The use of suzetrigine for moderate to severe acute pain could play an important role in curbing the opioid epidemic. We at Vertex are excited about the possibilities that suzetrigine can bring to the millions of patients suffering from moderate to severe acute pain in the US, and we are hopeful that suzetrigine will help bend the curve in the opioid epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. Next will be Kathy Sapp. Kathy is the CEO of the American Chronic Pain Association, and it shows she has no conflicts to disclose. And can you tell us, is that still the case, Kathy?
Yes, that is the case.
Okay, you will have 5 minutes to say whatever you want to say.
So thank you for having us. I'm actually representing two organizations. One is the American Chronic Pain Association as the CEO, and the second is Patient Mind as president and co-founder of that organization in regards to this public hearing on acute pain. Both of our organizations provide peer support, education, and hope to individuals living with pain, and also educating the healthcare professionals treating them. Our goals are to improve quality of life, enhance function, and reduce the suffering through a balanced approach to pain management. As longstanding advocates for people living with pain, both of our organizations work to ensure their needs are recognized, their pain is validated, and they have access to the best possible treatments to lead fulfilling lives. Despite advancements in pain management, healthcare professionals just don't have those tools in their toolbox to effectively treat pain. While prescription opioids have played a part in pain management, as we all know, their overuse, misuse, and abuse at multiple levels had led to significant long-term consequences and hurt to people living with pain. Pain management is inherently complex. Healthcare professionals need sufficient time and resources to fully understand a patient's pain, how it impacts their daily life, and their treatment goals. However, systemic barriers often result in inadequate care, leaving many patients without proper pain management. Too many individuals continue to suffer due to lack of access to quality, individualized, and multidisciplinary care. Effective pain management must be tailored to the individual and incorporate a broad spectrum of treatment options. The healthcare professional and patient relationship is key. At the core of effective pain management is the healthcare professional-patient relationship. Open communication is essential for expanding education, awareness, and access to quality care. Our organizations are dedicated to advancing quality care access by promoting innovative pain management solutions and resources that reduce the risk, lower the costs, and improve health outcomes. We respect and support companies like Vertex that are dedicated to developing innovative classes of pain therapies while also helping to combat the opioid crisis. So people with pain are anxiously waiting for better care and more treatment options. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for what all of you do.
Thank you, Kathy, for your time and your comments here. I wanted to see if any of the Midwest CEPAC members had any questions for either Paul or Kathy at this time. Gregory.
Yes, thank you very much for these presentations. I wanted to ask Dr. Negulescu why it was that it was decided not to do a head-to-head comparison with NSAIDs, given the fact that the risk of OUD with NSAIDs is little or none. It's been mentioned several times during our discussion this morning. It is such an obvious lapse that I thought that everyone would want to hear from you. What was the explanation for not doing this?
Thank you for the question. So the main objective of our phase 3 study and the design was in pursuit of that objective was to demonstrate that suzetrigine was effective as a monotherapy. And we used ibuprofen as a rescue therapy. So that was in the design, we wanted to study suzetrigine by itself. Now, the reason we chose an opioid containing comparator arm, which was the hydrocodone acetaminophen arm, is that opioids are commonly prescribed in these indications, in post-surgical indications, as part of the therapy. So we wanted to compare against the most commonly prescribed medicine post-surgical, and that was acetaminophen and hydrocodone. There's certainly I heard your remarks earlier and your questions earlier about combination therapy with ibuprofen. And certainly there are some data in our study because many patients did take ibuprofen as rescue. And we are intending to publish post hoc analyses that look at the effects of suzetrigine alone plus the ibuprofen rescue.
Thank you. For a follow-up on that, if you're comparing it against hydrocodone acetaminophen in what's apparently a moderate to severe pain situation, why did you limit it to the low dose? Why not compare it to the high dose in a head-to-head manner to get the answer to that question?
Right. Well, the dose that was chosen is a very commonly prescribed dose, and we were aiming to minimize the exposure of patients in the study to opioids as part of our thought process. So we wanted a dose that was efficacious, but not necessarily exposing patients to a lot of opioids in these studies. So it was a judgment call, and it was a commonly prescribed dose every 4 hours, the 5 milligrams of hydrocodone. It's Norco. It's the same regimen as Norco every 4 hours.
Thank you. David.
Thank you. And Dr. Negulescu, one of the things obviously we were worried about was this renal signal. And I'm wondering if we know more about that at this point, either from other chronic pain or other acute pain studies, because it just seems like it's not obvious to me why that should be an issue. But I'm just wondering if we know more at this point.
We believe that the CK, the creatinine clearance numbers, are not of clinical significance, and we do not believe there is any effect on renal function with suzetrigine. This is based on data both from the acute studies, but also we're obtaining more and more data now from ongoing studies with suzetrigine in chronic conditions. So we have more data now out longer, and we do not believe there is any renal function risk associated with suzetrigine.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and for answering those questions. We'll move on to our next public commenter. It is Marvel Adams. He's the CEO of Caregiver Action Network. It's reported that he has no conflicts of interest. He has collaborated with Forbes Tate Partners to compose this public comment. So Marvel, you'll be given 5 minutes, and then we may have some questions for you. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, or good afternoon, should I say. And thank you for the opportunity to address the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review's evidence report on the effectiveness and value of a new treatment option for acute pain. As I said, my name is Marvell Adams Jr., and I serve as the president and CEO of Caregiver Action Network, or CAN for short, the nation's leading caregiver, family caregiver organization. CAN works to improve the quality of life of millions of family and caregivers. These Americans care for loved ones with chronic conditions, disabilities, and diseases, bringing peace of mind and comfort to countless Americans. They also serve on the front lines of pain treatment, supporting their loved ones as they navigate acute pain. In many cases, Patients are prescribed an opioid to manage acute pain, and while there is a time and place for opioids in pain management, there are patients who want or need alternatives without the risk of having their pain undertreated. Far too often, opioids and other prescription drugs in the household can be diverted, misused, or abused. And the impact is evident. In a Kaiser Family Foundation report from 2024, data showed that opioid deaths increased by nearly 9% for people 65 and older, while falling in other age groups. Furthermore, another study found that the odds of an opioid-related overdose increased by 60% when another household member had an opioid prescription filled in the last 6 months. Our caregivers, their families, and their loved ones are more susceptible to these risks than others through diversion, misuse, and abuse of opioids. A non-opioid treatment option has the potential to revolutionize the care industry by preventing addiction before it begins and safeguarding our homes and those in our care. Pain is a condition we are all familiar with, but it also is an area where there have been limited developments in treatment over the last 20 years. Although current therapies are often effective for pain management, so many have limitations due to side effects or addictive potential. Now, a new non-opioid, non-addictive treatment option has the potential to change this. As ICER reported, evidence is promising with data suggesting that a new non-opioid treatment for acute pain may provide a net health benefit. At CAN, I have witnessed firsthand the pervasiveness of the opioid epidemic on our communities. So many of our deaths stem from abuse of opioids prescribed for acute pain after falls or surgeries. I am pleased to see that ICER's analysis recognizes that in the long run, this novel treatment option is likely to be cost-effective due to mitigating opioid use disorder and opioid overdoses. I encourage ICER and all health policy decision makers to continue to consider the tremendous value a non-opioid, non-addictive treatment option offers patients and do what can be done to support equitable access to all communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Marvell. Do any Midwest CEPAC members have any questions? David.
Sorry to raise this late, Mr. Adams. I know that you had been one of our later people to come and decide to give a comment, but I just want to make sure we were right on the conflicts of interest, because we had the impression that Caregiver Action Network did receive money from Vertex. Is that not right?
No, that's not correct.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that then. We were just looking at websites and wanted to make sure we understood everything. So we try to make sure, because it was so late on this, that we're clear on all conflicts of interest.
No,
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you making the clarification.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for Marvell? Okay, thank you, Marvell. Our next presenter is Cindy Steinberg. She is the Director of Advocacy and Policy from the U.S. Pain Foundation. Would you like to tell us about your conflict of interest, and then you'll also have 5 minutes to make your comments.
Sure. U.S. Pain Foundation does receive funding from pharmaceutical companies, including Vertex, as well as from grants and foundations.
Thank you. You can begin your comments.
Thank you to ICER for the opportunity to comment today. Pain is an enormous, yet often under-recognized public health challenge, imposing substantial burdens on individuals, families, and society. Each year, approximately 80 million Americans experience moderate to severe pain, lasting up to 3 months, leading to considerable physical, emotional, and financial distress. These challenges are exacerbated for individuals without job security or robust support systems. An effective treatment that alleviates acute pain and facilitates a rapid return to daily function and employment holds immense economic and societal value. If suzetrigine demonstrates both safety and efficacy in providing pain relief while restoring well-being productivity, and quality of life. It could offer a transformative solution for millions of people experiencing acute pain. Suzetrigine's approval by the FDA marks a trailblazing achievement in the field of pain medicine. There has not been a new medication for pain with a novel mechanism of action approved in more than a decade, with the single exception of the CGRP medications for migraine. In 2023, BIO reported that pain drug development has only a 0.7% probability of approval from phase 1, substantially lower than the average success rate of 6.5% for novel drug programs across all diseases. It would be hard to overstate the value of this innovation. ICER has calculated its assessment of the value of suzetrigine by modeling the probability and cost of addiction that could result from a week's exposure to opioid medication for pain relief. We agree that this is a fair and reasonable approach to assessing the value of suzetrigine. Opioid use disorder has sadly led to a large number of overdose deaths, and every instance of OUD that can be averted by using suzetrigine to treat acute pain justifies the cost of the medication. Suzetrigine has the potential to fill what has increasingly become an unmet need for moderate to severe acute pain control. Over the past approximately 9 years, the prescribing of manufactured opioids has declined by more than 45% as concern over the abuse of prescription pills grew. It is often now the case that patients are sent home from surgery with prescription strength or over-the-counter nonsteroidals or acetaminophen, and in some cases, no medication at all for acute pain control. NSAIDs carry their own serious risks, including gastrointestinal ulcers and bleeding, kidney and liver injury, and cardiovascular issues. Acetaminophen is generally less effective for severe or even moderate pain control than at high doses can cause liver injury. Based on available data, suzetrigine has demonstrated a strong safety profile, with discontinuation rates due to adverse events remaining below 1% across all study arms. As real-world evidence continues to emerge, we will gain an even clearer understanding of its long-term safety and efficacy. However, novel treatments are only meaningful if patients can access them. Public and private payers, as well as employers, play a critical role in ensuring that evidence-based, cost-effective pain management options are available to all who need them. Reducing administrative barriers, improving coverage policies, and prioritizing value-based care are essential steps in addressing the unmet needs of individuals suffering from acute and chronic pain. Expanding access to innovative therapies must be a priority if we're to avoid past problems and provide comprehensive patient-centered pain care. While our focus today is on compelling new treatment for pain, it is important to remember that best practice in pain care is an individualized, multidisciplinary treatment plan combining pharmacological and non-pharmacological approaches. While the HHS Pain Management Best Practices Report is often referenced in the context of chronic pain, the task force also tackled acute pain management, stressing the need for multimodal treatment strategies. The task force recommendations can serve as a useful framework for ensuring that new treatments like suzetrigine are integrated effectively into the armamentarium of comprehensive pain management. Thank you for considering my views.
Cindy, thank you very much for your comments. Do any members of the Midwest CEPAC have any questions for Cindy? Eric.
Just a quick comment, and really appreciating your emphasis in your comments around the multimodal treatments for acute and/or chronic pain. And I think it just highlights the fact that polypharmacy, or more specifically, I think as you highlighted, non-pharmaceutical approaches to pain management are critical. And the trials that we're looking at today looked at monotherapy exclusively. But I just really appreciate you reminding us of that framework, and then reminding us that the best treatment plans in pain management are likely to be multimodal, that include a combination of pharmaceutical and non-pharma interventions. Thank you, Cindy.
Sure. Thank you for your comment.
Any other questions for Cindy? I wanted to say that for those not watching the chat, Marvell, thank you for updating this. Marvell wrote in the chat that in the past, Caregiver Action Network has received money from Vertex. He said his original comment was in reference to his appearance today, where Vertex did not pay for his appearance, but they have given money to Caregiver Action Network. So that is in correcting his conflict of interest so that the process stays very transparent. Thank you for that, Marvell. We appreciate that. Okay, our last public commenter is Margaret French, Senior Director, Federal Affairs, Voices for Non-Opioid Choices. Margaret, if you would, tell us about your conflicts of interest, and you will also be given 5 minutes to make your public comments.
Hi, thank you, Jill. Thank you, everyone. Really pleased to be here today. I am a registered federal lobbyist, and Voices for Non-Opioid Choices, which is the organization that I am here on behalf of, has received money from pharmaceutical companies, including Vertex Pharmaceuticals. So just want to be clear there. And if I may, I'd be happy to begin my comments.
Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So as I said, my name is Margaret French, and on behalf of Voices for Non-Opioid Choices, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Voices is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing opioid addiction. Voices and our members advocate for policies that encourage access to and the use of non-opioid treatments. To the extent that such novel therapies are approved by the FDA, access to such therapies could go a long way towards preventing opioid addiction that can occur, especially after an acute pain incident. Today, we lose more than 200 Americans every day to an opioid-related drug overdose. Unfortunately, this is an increase of more than 70% in just 6 years. While the latest data from the CDC does show that rates of opioid-related drug overdoses are decreasing in the United States, there are still some serious cause for concern. Notably, unfortunately, rates of opioid-related overdose deaths are still historically high, and decreases in these opioid-related overdose deaths are not universal. Some groups, including older Americans, are actually seeing increases in rates of opioid-related overdoses. The country's response to the opioid addiction crisis has largely focused on strategies to prevent opioid-related overdose deaths, rather than preventing opioid addiction in the first place. This is a missed opportunity, and more work and options are needed in this area. Voices and our over 200 members know that there is an opportunity to prevent addiction before it starts, particularly for opioid naive and acute pain patients. One way to prevent opioid misuse, dependence, and addiction is to minimize potentially unnecessary exposure to prescription opioids after surgery. In the United States, as you know, the vast majority of acute pain patients are prescribed opioids. It's estimated that approximately 10% of these patients, or more than 4 million Americans, will become newly persistent opioid users following a surgical procedure. Some of these Americans will transition away from prescription opioids and turn to other illicit forms of opioids. Some will overdose, and some will die. There is a tremendous opportunity to address this pathway to addiction by treating acute pain patients with non-addictive approaches. Again, multimodal pain protocols, which we've heard about before, involve prioritizing a combination of non-addictive pain approaches to give patients the proper support while reducing over-reliance on prescription opioids. Clinicians need more tools at their disposal to treat acute pain patients. The majority of states in this country limit the amount of prescription opioids that a provider may give to a patient. While this is a credible first step intended to reduce exposure, it does little to give clinicians other tools that they need in place of opioids. This is why innovations in the non-opioid pain space are so exciting. These approaches offer the opportunity to improve clinical practice of pain management and to do so without fear of the repercussions that may come with exposure to prescription opioids. Innovation in the non-opioid pain management space is an exciting prospect. It's exciting for patients, families, caregivers, and providers who for too long have been left without choices when it comes to pain management decisions. To the extent that such products are viewed favorably by decision makers at the FDA, Voices believes that they will represent a viable path forward for patients and providers and will go a long way towards facilitating conversations between patients and their providers about preferences for post-surgical pain management. Thank you for your consideration of these comments today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Margaret. We appreciate you as well. Let's see, what comments or questions do any of the Midwest CEPAC members have for Margaret? Anybody from ICER have any questions for any of our public commenters today? Okay, not hearing any. I would just like to tell you guys, all of the public commenters, thank you for providing these different facets of enlightenment and things. It helps our process. It helps us not forget some things that maybe don't show up in the report, and we appreciate you. As far as the next, I'm going to need some guidance. I guess it's lunch. We see that lunch will resume, our meeting will resume after lunch at 12:50 Central Time. It's 12:12 right now, so it looks like it'll have to be a pretty quick turnaround. Okay. We'll see you at 12:50. If the Midwest CEPAC members could show up a couple of minutes early to make sure everything's working again, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill.